There was a point after my injury where I almost gave up. I was ready to throw in the towel. It was that moment that I think determined a lot of what was going to happen afterwards, and even up to this day. It had been maybe 2-3 weeks after my injury. I had gone through, obviously, the first initial shock of what was going on. I was in the hospital. I wasn't doing very well. My body was different. I had just sustained a spinal cord injury from the surfing accident. And, I had paralysis from my chest down. And it was a very, very shocking moment, and just shocking, a couple of weeks. When something like that happens, it takes a long time for you to start assimilating and understanding what's going on, especially if you're a young person. I was 15 years old, about to turn 16. And so when I started waking up in the hospital after getting rid of all the sedatives and everything, all the medication that I was taking, I knew that I was in trouble. And so the first few weeks were just like deep, 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 dark days. Obviously, during the day, I would almost be normal. I would, it was like faking it, right? I wanted to fake it till I made it, that saying. And most of the time I just spent it, with family, friends were there for me, and so on and so forth. So that's how I kept my spirits up during those times. But at night, when everybody would leave, my mom, my dad would have to go home and sleep, and my brother and sister had to go to school. It became really, really lonely. It became really, really, really tough. And so at night, all I could do was just, think about my life, think about my future, think about some of the things that were going on. And I would spend a lot of the nights crying. I would cry, and it was really ridiculous because I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. I had a tracheotomy. My arms and my legs were pretty much paralyzed. It felt like I had a ton of, bricks over my body. And, but I would cry, and it was just desperation. It was frustration. It was sadness. It was guilt for putting my family through that. I mean, there were so many emotions that a young person with, 15, 16 years of life, barely just, finding myself. It was just super, super difficult. So at night, I really wanted to kill myself. I wanted to end it. I was telling God to please, end it for me so that I wasn't suffering anymore. And it was just super, super hard and super devastating for me. But I always think about my family, right? I always thought about my family because I didn't want to let them down. They were there always for me, and I didn't want to, die and cause even more pain, because I knew that they were going through a lot of difficult things, a lot of difficult moments themselves. So one day, the thing that changed it for me was a moment where I was laying in bed. I was, having a conversation with my dad, and at that time I was still, I was pretty coherent. I was pretty aware of what was going on. At that moment in time, I was blaming God. I was blaming just everything else for what was going on. I wasn't really accepting the situation. I just wanted to get out of there. I wanted to go home. I didn't really have the motivation just to get up every other day. And I asked this very, very difficult question to my dad. I asked him, why me? I asked my dad, why me, Dad? And at that time, my dad was in his 40s. It's my age right now. And it was such a difficult question and such a tough question, but he did beautifully. He stood there, on the side of the bed, thought about it for a few seconds, maybe a couple of seconds, and then said, why not? Why not you? And obviously it was a harsh and very strong message. And immediately it didn't sink in, right? Immediately I didn't know exactly how to react, but it got me thinking, and over the next few days, I started thinking about what he said. I started thinking about why not? Who am I to not be going through what I'm going through? It was an error, it was a mistake, it was an accident, however you want to call it. It's what it is. It was what it was. And I dove in head first and I injured myself. It was me that decided to go surfing. It was me that decided to dive off the board, so I started taking accountability for my situation. I started, thinking about it, the things that I had to do to get better. And it didn't happen overnight. It was difficult. I was in a very, very deep place. So I had to dig myself out of that depression hole. But it was really important for my dad to be straight with me, to be real with me, to be honest, right? And to bring in some perspective at that moment. To me, my family, that moment was crucial, and my dad was important right there. But this was just a reflection of the support that I had all around over all these years. I mean, over all these days. And really the support that I had from family and friends was crucial. But that was the moment where I decided to move forward. And little by little, I started regaining, not movement, not walking again, none of those things. But I regained my confidence, I regained my positive attitude, and I regained all the things that I needed to start moving forward, and started putting brick by brick together and laying out the foundation to what would be, my recovery. Eventually I went back to school. Eventually I went back to college. I graduated. I went to school, graduate school, I should say. Then I, ended with a dream job as a sports broadcaster. And that's how my journey kind of continued. And I've accomplished so many things because of that moment and all the support that I had. So that moment was crucial in my life, and lesson learned, I think, is that support, get the support that you need from your family and from your friends, from people that are strangers. Accept it. Don't be so arrogant and so proud that you don't need support. We all need support. Even the most able-bodied person needs support to get through life. Accept it, embrace it, learn to ask for help, learn to take advice, learn to listen to advice or to people giving advice. That's important. It's not always going to work, but it's always important to do that. So anyway, that's what kind of kept me going, what really rescued me from a very, very deep place. And I hope that story and that anecdote kind of helps you if you're going through something difficult. So if you have a spinal cord injury, subscribe. We're trying to make sense of this thing. After 31 years, I'm still learning. And if you have somebody that you love that has a spinal cord injury, feel free to send this to them or subscribe as well. So I'm sharing all these stories from 31 years, and hopefully there's more to come. Talk to you soon.